Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Scott Montague from Coquitlam Search and Rescue, and I'm going to be the load master running the tech behind the scenes today. Got some good news for you. If you stick around till the end of our session, you'll have a chance to win a giveaway from our sponsor, Hillsound. Your cameras and mics are off for the session, but we still want to hear your comments and questions. On your screen is a question mark button or a question box. Use it to post anything that you want to tell us, or you can ask us a question and we'll answer online or in the QA part of the presentation. To get us started, we have none other than the Executive Director of BC AdventureSmart. Please help me welcome Sandra Riches.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone. It's great to be here with you tonight, and thanks for joining us for our summer series. We've had a few workshops already and excited to welcome our special guest here tonight. I'm grateful to be joining you tonight from the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people. I've had a busy day myself, traveling from the Lillooet First Nation out to the Katzie First Nation, and now in the Squamish, pardon me, Coast Salish, specifically Tsleil-Waututh. So I've had a busy day traveling from Whistler to Pitt Meadows to North Vancouver, heading back to Whistler after tonight's session. These series webinars have been helpful for everyone who's attended, and the focus of them is to help you get informed before you go outdoors, so you can learn from subject matter experts, just like our guest tonight. So let's welcome someone who has a beautiful bird's eye view, more than most of us, Fred Carey. He's had a colorful career in aviation. Fred is the Deputy Director of the Provincial Emergency Program, Air Division, also known for some of us as PEP Air. This is a volunteer position. So Fred has been volunteering for a long time as a search pilot since 1998. So that's the year my son was born. So we're going to say 24 years. My math is right. It better be. I better know how old my son is. Fred has used high technology for mitigating air searches using thermal imaging, color video, photo analysis, radio tracking in both fixed wing and drone aircraft. He has demonstrated a history of working in public safety industry, strong community and special social services, professionally skilled in network architecture, voice over IP, emergency management, radio engineering, and product management. PEPAIR is a member of the Civil Air Search and Rescue Association, also known for some of us internally as CASARA. That is a national organization. We're so grateful to have Fred's viewpoint here, his perspectives, and that one is of a search pilot that can give all of us as potential subjects. We're all potential subjects, hopefully never, but we're here to learn from Fred's bird's eye view and perspective and long time volunteering as a search pilot. Long overdue. Welcome aboard, and pass the baton over to you, Fred. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, it's just the beginning of the changes that have been going on over the year, where we're starting to see more interoperability with the ground search and rescue and the marine search and rescues. And so we might as well just jump right into it. Oh, I went into the wrong button here. Starting off on the right foot. So we'll just switch over to here. And I hope everybody can see that just fine for the kickoff for summer 2022. We've all had a long, difficult time over the last couple of years, but trying to keep current and everything. We've had the excitement of a lot of communications over the last 2 years with our partners in search and rescue. So I'll just go quickly over the federal, national, and the provincial architecture that we see here. Is that the National Search and Rescue Secretariat, which is the group on the left here, on the top left, the Coast Guard and Canadian Forces volunteers. So Civil Air Search and Rescue is auxiliary to Canadian Armed Forces. We work under a D&D contribution agreement, and for the Ground Search and Rescue, I hope that I got that right, is SARVAC, Search and Rescue Volunteer Association of Canada, and then we have the Auxiliary Coast Guard for the Marine side. But on the provincial statute here for the volunteer organizations in BC, we all kind of operate under Emergency Management BC, which used to be PEP, Provincial Emergency Program, and that's why we have the name PEP Air, and we kind of kept it because that was the name that was used in the province, and it was recognizable. But mostly to the SAR teams, we kind of hide in the background. And then we've got the British Columbia Search and Rescue Association, which has all the municipal ground search and rescue members and teams. RCM SAR, which is Royal Canadian Marine SAR in BC. They've got Royal Ascension to use Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue. And we also have a new player, which is the Coastal Nations Coast Guard Auxiliary, working north of along the coast and fulfilling some huge gaps in the marine search and rescue. So we try to meet with them quarterly and keep interoperability very high on the radar. So CASARA National, that's the national organization. And again, it's a comprise of civilian and military search and rescue aircraft. We have a posturing of about 1 to 2 hours of being a call out. That's my aircraft sitting there with the now retired C-115 Buffalo. As of January the 15th, you will not see these anymore. They're offline, and we're waiting for the next generation to come alive. Here in British Columbia, we have the Provincial Emergency Program Air Division, which is PEP Air, and we work with the Canadian Armed Forces out of Esquimalt 442 Squadron up in Comox, and you can see the venerable Cormorant helicopter at the fueling station in Chilliwack, and with the Buffalo as well. So the Cormorant will be staying with us and will be still one of our primary rotary wing search and rescue aircraft, and then the civilian aircraft that we fly. So over the years, the 24 years that I've been involved, we've been the eyes in the skies, because one of the primary roles in our contribution agreement is to supply spotters for major searches in military aircraft. And this is a 452 out of Comox, which is now retired. And those are CASARA members that have been trained as spotters to go on board, but they also work very well they're trained with us on the fixed wing aircraft. And then we try to have about a 4-to-1 ratio, so that when the armed forces require more spotters on board because of the cycle times, we can provide that to them with trained spotters, and they work with us in the light aircraft to make them high performance in the larger aircraft. And there's the Kingfisher that we're waiting for. Looks like 2025 to 2026 before that comes online, and there's some wonderful technologies that are going to be going on board. I'll just touch on some of those. We're just in the integration phase of those. I was lucky to be asked to be part of the testing of all this stuff, so stay tuned for that. I'll mention a bit of that over this presentation. Things are changing. This is the 21st century, so there's lots going on. And look at the topography that we have to deal with here in British Columbia. We're pretty unique in British Columbia. We have the highest amount of calls and taskings and in Canada. So we've kind of led the way because of the things we've had to deal with, and looking for ways of improving. The main purpose of our existence is to narrow down the search areas. We're not very good on the rescue part of it, because we are the search phase, and then we can maintain integrity over the once we've mitigated the location of where the recovery or rescue has to be, and then we get the ground SAR or the military SAR techs to go in and do that. So we're mostly on the search phase. So when the Joint Rescue Coordination Center gets a call, how it works with them, this is in the air service for general aviation or anything. When JRCC gets a call, it's usually when there is what we call, there's in 3 phases. There's the uncertainty phase, which we're not sure what's going on, and something like no communication has been received from an aircraft within a period of 30 minutes when they should have, or a flight plan has been filed and there's no arrival report. And usually if it's on a flight plan, that has to happen within 60 minutes of the flight plan filed for the termination of the arrival. And things start happening after that 60 minutes. There is a thing called a flight itinerary. If somebody's going to be doing flights up in the northern where there is no phones or anything, they'll put an itinerary in, but that's kind of spanned out to a 24-hour period before they will start to activate the next phase of the uncertainty phase. And also, if there's a situation that exists where there's uncertainty to the safety of an aircraft, if they've flown through an area where there's major fires or something of that magnitude, that's something that we would put into the uncertainty phase as well. And there's a thing called emergency locator transmitter. I'll get more into that in a bit. But if we do pick up one up from the analog, there's two sides. There's the analog and the digital that goes through the satellite. I'll clarify that in a minute. But if we get one, that's an uncertainty phase. So once we've reached that level, the JRCC will then proceed to the alert phase, in which case they would want to start putting together a plan on moving forward on resolving the later overdue aircraft. So if the analog ALT has been reported, we're still trying to move towards isolating what's happened there. And then also following the uncertainty phase is the communication search procedure fails to receive any new information. So if the aircraft that we can find out through the ELT or whatever, we can phone them. And if we're not getting any results, we still stay in the alert phase. The aircraft has been cleared to land and fails to land within 5 minutes, and that's happened a lot. Even along the coast here, they're cleared to land and they don't arrive. That's the alert phase. We'll start figuring out what happened there. And then the information has been received, which indicates that the operating efficiency of the aircraft has been impaired, run out of gas. They realize that there was a faulty with the aircraft. That stays in the alert phase. And then we go into the distress phase. Once we start getting a 406 ELT that's been reported, we can move very forward on that. We've changed from the analog 121.5 to the 406 because of the immediate response, and we have an aircraft tagged to that signal. And then we can move pretty quickly on phoning the responsible people or the pilot or whoever. So that moves right into the distress phase that we can go forward on that. The fuel on board is considered to be exhausted. If you had a flight that we knew was going to be within a 3-hour period and it's now 5 hours and he still hasn't arrived, that's a distress phase. We're going to start looking at the last known position and beyond. Or if we have information that the aircraft has been impaired. These are the legal sides of all of this, or forced landing has been likely, so we can backtrack. Or if there's information received that the aircraft was required to do a forced landing and requires immediate assistance, or the downed aircraft is located. Not unusual, that sometimes that happens. And of course, if the analog ELT transmission is referred to the uncertainty stage, has been linked to an overdue aircraft, or has been notified at an airport. This happens a lot, that the ELT transmission has been picked up, ends up being a guy landed, inadvertently switched on his ELT and has gone home. We've had that a lot. So that's not really the distress phase. We go back into the uncertainty stage and we don't go to the distress phase. But that used to result in about 70% of our incidences. But since we switched to 406, it's much lower. So the flight plans and itineraries are essential. The primary sources of information for search and rescue on the air side, and ELTs, which is on board the aircraft, they're mandatory. And they have a G switch, so if the aircraft lands more than 2 Gs, this thing will automatically go off. And as of February the 1st, 2009, the satellites will only detect the 406 ELT signals. And those are geostationary satellites, and they work very well. And that saves a lot of time and energy to be able to resolve or mitigate what's going on. So we work directly with the Air Force on that. JRCC, when they do get an ELT, we're the ones that normally get called. We practice for it all the time. We have emergency locator transmitter homers that we use to go out. They're on the aircraft, they're on the ground. A lot of times we're just driving to an airport and going to turn one off. But when we do have them off site, we work directly with the armed forces, and we create a lot of planning. So we will try to bring out as many. We'll do a SAR initial where we'll try to resolve the stuff in the uncertainty and the emergency stage, and then after fact we will we'll slow things down and go into what we call a major SAR, where we'll pull out all the stops. We'll bring in all the aircraft as many as we can, as many military resources and civilian resources as we can, and we go through a huge planning period and get very, very organized and slow down and really take it serious. This is what's called the Canadian Search Area Definition, which is part of our SAR planning. And because we're in British Columbia with that previous picture I showed you with the topography being very, very unique, if you were in Ontario, this would be, this point over here on the left down to the bottom could be known as the last known position of the flight. We knew he was in that area, and going directly to this lake up here or where he was going to land. You could draw a line and draw a box around that. The search area definition has a 5 nautical mile each side box. It's based on statistics, and then 5 nautical miles beyond and behind. And then for the secondary stage, it's another 5 nautical miles beyond that circumference, and that would be the secondary. So this would be the primary search area, and if we didn't have anything, we would go to the secondary. 99.9% of the time, we would find what we're looking for inside the primary search area. Now, when we're in our area, the second one that's all over the place, this is more real. This is what we would really have to do because we've got mountain obstructions. There's probably no way that he would have flown directly through these mountains. So we would follow what would be called the visual flight rule routes or VFR routes. And this would be through valleys. So this would be the high potential that the pilot probably would have flown. So, but we'd have to check them both. So you would see an overlay of two search area definitions that we would have. And you can look, they're quite large. That's why we use airplanes to cover this area. It's a very, very large area. And so we would break these down into maybe 5 mile segments and then send aircraft into each area. And we'd do them left to right, up to down, called a creeping line ahead or a track crawl. We'd be doing all different types of search patterns. And hopefully we would, and it would take at certain times of the day because it takes the right person at the right angle, at the right time, with the right lighting to spot something, because we're literally looking for a needle in a haystack in a lot of these areas, because this is not urban or even rural. This is all backcountry stuff, and that's 90% of our search areas. So the 406 beacons, just to quickly go back over that again, is relatively a new technology, and it is embedded with digital information in the aircraft, so it has much improved location accuracy. Like I say, it's improved our response capability so much faster because we actually, when we hear an ELT go off, we actually have an aircraft assigned to it, so we can start there. Whereas in the old days, you'd pick up an ELT and, okay, who is it? What is it? We seem to get a location on it, but we have no idea who this could be. Now we can narrow it down and say, hey, is your plane out, or do you know who should be flying that plane? And say yes, this, and then get that information from the flight that was probably tied to that aircraft that's on the ELT. But we still need the integral 121.5, which is in the VHF region, that we actually lock into in the aircraft. Well, that's not going to go away. So we have the signal that tells who it is, and then we have a signal that comes out of it on a lower frequency that we can fly to with our technology. And they use a 5-year lithium battery. They're mandatory registrations, but it's free to register. And that sometimes we do get a hit on an ELT, and the guy hasn't registered. No help at all. And it just reiterates the fact that the 406 versus the 121.5, these are megahertz frequencies. The 121.5 rely on other pilots to report because they will hear them on the radio. And the search time and the rescue time is in the hours, because we have to figure out who it is, what it is, and try to put that together, where the 406 is 1 minute response time to the satellite, and we know who it is. So it's crucial that we move to the site as quickly as possible, because after 6 to 8 hours, the probability of survival astronomically decreases. So the response time is very, very important. So cooperative targets, let's talk about that, because people in AdventureSmart, even out on the trails and stuff, have to be cooperative targets for the search and rescue teams, even out on the boats. For the air service, general aviation, these are what we would call operational cooperative targets. So they have a 406 megahertz beacon that is registered, so we know who it is if we get one, and solves a lot of investigative problems. Then there's the 406 armed on the pre-flight. Make sure it's working before you fly, and then file a flight plan. And just to talk about that for a moment, when you showed you the CSAD, those are 10 and 5 mile distances from the flight path. If you decided on a flight plan that you're going to go from Vernon to Vancouver, but you decided that you're going to whip up towards Williams Lake and visit Uncle Sam up in the lake there, and they crash going in there, we will never look there. We will tear apart the flight plan. So if you're going to change your flight plan, notify flight services and update the flight plan. It's very, very important. Make sure you got the right survival equipment. We could talk for hours on that. Signal mirrors. I'd like to show you a little bit of that because that kind of was a dying art, but they really work well. Flashlights at night are very well detected from an aircraft. Any type of distress signal, flares, fire, all kinds of stuff. And one of the things we always try to say, don't leave the crash location unless it's unsafe. And if it is unsafe, to stay within the area. And if you're able to call emergency services, but that's usually not the case. So again, getting back to communication and signals, we're in airplanes, we don't hear whistles very well. And the communication, unless you have a radio, we don't really have a lot to go on. So we'd like to fill you in on ways that you can become a cooperative target. Just going to see if I can get this to run here. This is out in a field. We asked the guy to give us a signal mirror and see what it looked like. It's very hard to actually explain what that is, and there is a way to teach it. And if you get a chance to do it, I would recommend it, because this is what a real mirror looks like from our point of view as we're flying. It stands out like a sore thumb. And this is in a very urban center, so there's a lot of distractions. So that you pick that up right away. The whole crew sees that immediately. So signal mirrors are still a valid form of communication for us. Now let's get back to the tracking devices. We could talk for hours on this as well. There's the Spot, there's Garmin InReach, the new Spot X's, there's satellite spots, and then the private EPIRBs. The EPIRBs are the personal emergency locator buildings that operate on the same emergency locator transmitters that we use. So we are very well trained on using these. And then there's the ones that they use in vessels as well, all on 406. So it is a common usage, and we are all trained to go to those locations and mitigate the location for the rescue people. Cell phones. I would say in the last 25 years that I've been flying, cell phones have had the biggest impact on our capability of mitigating locations of where people are on the ground or in aircraft that have gone down. The cell phone usually does survive a crash, and we've seen some pretty bad incidences where the cell phone still survived, and I don't think we would have been able to bring closure to the family if we didn't have the cell phone on board. We used it to locate. I'll tell you how we did that. But cell phones are a big part of search and rescue, and I think we're going to see some changes. Bell and TELUS right now in Canada are communicating with Department of National Defense on ways that we can make it better. I love this screen because it's pretty self-explanatory, but what it's showing here is why the cell phones didn't have anything in over the last 30 years that cell phones have been around. So you've always had the location-based technologies, that's the LBS on top. Most cell phones have at least 5 location-based technologies built in them. Not one of them, any one of them are actually all that good, but collectively they can get pretty accurate. So you've got all these user group capabilities, open APIs, which are applications Advertising is very important. So they look at all the mobile content through your Facebook and Twitter and all those equipments. And then there's a deep packet information that has always been the part of that has been falling towards the advertising. And that's where the money comes from. So the phone companies don't get anything out of this. So when you really look at it all for convergence of commerce versus search and rescue, it all boils right down to dollars. And there's when we're working as volunteers in order to make Canada a better place for search and rescue, we don't have a lot of money to do that. So that's why you have such a strong volunteer organization, because the level has to be up there. So what we're seeing now is some wonderful technologies that are being incorporated. Michael Coyle from Coquitlam Search and Rescue came up with your location. That's my favorite. You've probably heard ones called, what was it called? That word or something like that. That's not
What
one.
3 words?
What 3 words? Thank you.
Yeah.
What 3 words? We tried it. Man, there's so many things that can go wrong with that. Please, there's better ways to do that. I know this one down here called Find Your Friends. I always call it Stalk Your Friends. If you have friends, like a couple of my buddies have had incidences with their aircraft, and because we've kind of stayed friends, and we want to track where they're going through the cell phones, we've actually been able to see where they've gone. Find My Phone is a brilliant way to do it. If somebody's gone down and the family has access to Find Your Phone, make sure you have that turned on. But your location is a great free program that you can download. Or actually, if you write this down exactly as you see it here, yourlo.ca/TION, it'll take you to a little bit of a web page, and it's a simple location finding. And what it does is that I'm just going to go quickly here because I'm sure CASARA has talked about this, but it doesn't hurt to go over it again. And that what will happen is that you can put in your name, your email address. It'll pop up a unique ID for request to make sure that that's you and who you're going to send the information to, and it'll come up with a test your location. Now, when you get to the test of your location, you'll see on the left side here, it came up with a location, but the accuracy was 4,300. That's over 4 kilometers away, or error. So before you send off any location to anybody, make sure you get it down as low as you can. Like this one's saying 165 meters. You can get it right down to probably 5 meters, depending on where you are, but make sure you get the lowest or the highest accuracy with the lowest amount of numbers here before you send that location off to GSAR. And they can take that and send in a helicopter, or we can even go in and have a look and see what's there, or they can just hike in on the ground to that location. And that's when you use the whistle or calling and everything. So it's in BC, and it's been used many times with immediate and great results. And I just wanted to show you this here. This is what cell coverage looks like in British Columbia, north of the Lower Mainland. When you start getting up into Pinecone Provincial Park, up into Lake of the Woods over here, Harrison Lake, there's nothing. So if you get lost up in there, but the cell phones today, if you notice, they don't die when you leave it all in normal operation, because usually a keep alive for the cell to keep in contact with the network is usually every 18 minutes. And if it doesn't see that after a time, it sets up a scan, but it'll look for something coming from a host. And if it doesn't see it, it just goes to sleep for a while. And so it's good to leave it on, just in case you do run into service. And remember that just because you can't make a call doesn't mean you can't text. When you're trying to make a call, if you're up in the back of the Lions there and you're just getting fringe service and the call keeps dropping, try texting, because texting is much more robust. It'll keep trying until it gets a message through. So we're trying to solve some problems with the lack of cell coverage we have in the back park areas. In the old days, when we had a missing aircraft and we were able to get a fix on it, we would have to go, this is what a cell site path profile looks like. you can see the 3 arrays here on the BC 0327, which is Crawford Bay cell site, and they have 3 arrays on them. So you have a northeast, a west, and a southeast array, and this is the signal level. So if we can ping the phone and get a signal level, that can kind of narrow down the location. So we use all this technology just to try and get a better fix on where the cell or the person might be if we can make contact with the cell. This was one where we had an aircraft that had gone down. We weren't getting a response from the pilot. We could phone the phone, but there was no answer. And it was on this was the one on Crawford Bay, and it was called the Pilot Bay cell site. This was the flights we were doing in the area, trying to look for it. And when we talked to the network, this was a few years ago, we talked to the network and they were able to ping it. So we knew it was exactly 11.6 kilometers from the cell site. So we knew where it wasn't. And when we thought the most probable area, because the aircraft was traveling through the Grey Creek area, this became the high probability area. Again, we're narrowing down the search area. And I was quite surprised to find out that when we asked what the accuracy was 2 feet closer, never further. So 11.6 was pretty much it. So the Cormorant helicopter flew the line up the side of the ridge, and GSAR started coming down the line using it, and they went right to the wreckage. And we never would have found that aircraft without having that information from the cell phone. So those are, I could talk for 4 or 5 hours on all the searches we've done and how we've used the cell phones. So I'm just going to end the cell phone conversation with service areas. So this is the lower mainland here to the left with the blue dots. Those are all the cells in the area, and then the green ones are to the right. We had a helicopter flying from Langley going to Kelowna, and we did get a last known position out of him, out of Hope, and we knew that we could really narrow the area down because he did not get picked up by any of the 3 next ones. Now, when you get out of a lower mainland service area into a new area, that 18-minute sleep goes away. Soon as it sees a new site, it will adopt to it, and we get a ping saying he's now into that area. We never got a ping on any of these 3 sites from Princeton on the Coquihalla Highway or over on the Fraser Canyon. So we knew he didn't cross that line. So that was great stuff. We did actually locate him just a little bit south of or a little north of the Three Brothers Mountain. And but we, again, another one that we never would have found if we didn't have the cell phone information. So we're going to move to the latest technologies, and the whole idea again is to narrow down search and rescue coverage areas and get it onto a location as quickly as possible. So we had a gap, and there was a conversation for about 6 or 7 or 8 years where drones looked like they were going to be the game changer. And I worked with Coquitlam SAR, Michael Coyle, and a few other guys on trying to see if that was really valid or not. And I was interested enough to go and get my drone license and try it out, and it was like looking through a straw. That was what we were saying. And we had, fairly reasonable high definition cameras, but man, it's not 3-dimensional, very, very difficult. So we kind of sat on the idea for quite some time until recently we started looking at the technologies that were available. So we got a call from Central Fraser Valley, and they use Sartopo. So they've been using commercial drone operators, which we have discovered through the last 3-4 years through the United States sheriffs, county sheriffs, search and rescue groups using them. What was really critical is they had to have the air component. We have 25 years, or I personally have 25 years of air search and rescue. We know how that works. If you got a drone operator on the ground, he's a drone operator, but doesn't quite understand. And the worst thing you want to do is go to the search manager and say, okay, what do you want me to do? What should happen is that the search manager would show you the site that he says, I need that in there because it's just not safe to put the GSAR guys in, the ground search and rescue guys in on foot, go over that. And we know how to do that. We would just say, we'll let you know if we find anything, and we can remove that problem from him, or that workload from him, and deal with that on our own. And what we've discovered is that we can get into autonomous flights with creeping line of heads only on a smaller scale, like we would in the fixed wing aircraft. And we can program them in. We can do a recce flight just like we would in the fixed wing aircraft. And then we slow things down and get into the creeping line of heads, and we start doing video and thermal imaging. The big change is thermal imaging. Infrared, it's not the same as night vision. Night vision is a reflective, it's a higher frequency response, and it just gives you better vision. Thermal imaging is a temperature information, and it's a lower frequency, and you don't need anything to reflect for the reflectivity from it. You don't need to send infrared out to reflect that like you would on night vision. This is all thermal imaging, radiometric. And that's changed everything. Like, this is looking through trees of a SAR team that is stabilizing a patient. And it's just amazing that what we can see daytime and nighttime. And this is the earlier one when we first started about 2 years ago. The M2E dual on the left with the lower resolution thermal imaging was actually pretty good. But today we're using the more advanced on the M2 advanced, and it's 640 by 512. So we're not just looking at blurry pictures anymore. We're looking at solid images in thermal imaging, and we can look at them in radiometric. So any pictures we take, the thermal information goes with the picture, so we can really analyze them after the fact. This is one we did on an actual search, where this whole bog area you look into the right was just not safe to do along the river. So we went in with the drones, and we were running split screen on it. And when you look to the left, you see that white thing in there. What caught our eye was the ear flickering of a deer in there, and it stands out like a sore thumb on thermal imaging. But if you look to the right, it's really not there. And if we're moving along at, say, 10 to 12 knots, traveling along, the chances of seeing that, pretty slim. But that deer is alive and running at a specific temperature range and stood out beautifully. That's the game changer. So we thought, why not even take that into the fixed wing aircraft? So we've been testing different types of thermal imaging cameras, putting them out on the wing, and seeing what we could see. These were test flights. I love this one. This was taken on January the 22nd of 2021, and that dot you're seeing right there by the road was actually a bucket full of hot cinders. Nothing to see from the air. That was pitch black, that field, if we were flying over. And then what was just beyond that is the vehicle that dropped it off. And you can see it's kind of light colored underneath because it's hot. The top of the vehicle is cold, but because the engine takes longer to cool off, you could see that that was the vehicle. But that bucket stood out like crazy. So we told the guy that did that, go out to another field, and he was in a snowsuit, so he was trying to stay warm, and then he just pulled the top off, and there he is standing there. We can't really see who he is, but there's something that attracts our attention. That is a person standing in the field, and if we were looking out into a no man's land, that's even on the lower resolution camera at 1,000 feet in the air with a fixed wing aircraft. And this camera is on, it's in the lighter cost range. It's around the $3,000 range. But you know, 10 years ago, this would have been in the $15,000 range, and the ones we're using on the drones now would have been in about the $20,000, $30,000 range, and now they're down into the, you know, maybe $1,000. So I want to get back to the idea of being a cooperative target. This is from a drone at about 250 feet over a common area of visibility. So we have to understand that we're traveling along at a fair rate of speed, so we want things to stand out. So if you're wearing different colored clothes, you will stand out. That's very important. Don't go out hiking in camo. That's silly. You're hiding from the bears, I don't know, but we're not going to see you from the air. It's going to be very, very difficult. So red is really good. The blues, the fluorescent greens, wonderful stuff, because that does stand out. And using photogrammetry, we can prove these points. And that's the same picture taken at 1,000 feet. So again, that's very difficult for us to see. And that's where the drones can come in, between around 400 and down. This, if we can get down to about 500 feet, we would see that a lot better. but there it is over here in that clearing just above the garden area that you're seeing there on the left. Pretty difficult to see, but we can see it. And if our spotters are on their game, they'll see it. This is something that was taken when we were on a search along the shoreline, and there's people down there, but you're not going to see them. You could be standing there waving like crazy, and very, very difficult to see. There's a little bit closer. You can see the red shirts on, and as you get closer, that was very hard to see from the air. So you've got to make yourself known. We just want to go to another one here. So there's a boat we were looking for in the river. Can you see the boat there? It was pretty difficult to see from that angle, but it's there. And there it is there. They're not doing anything to try and be a cooperative target, like hanging out something red or mirrors or anything like that. This vessel was hung up on a sandbar about 30 kilometers up north of Alvin on the Coquitlam River. Pitt River, and just out the base of the Mamquam. It took them about 6 hours to go about 2 kilometers, and they were 30 kilometers before the trailhead. By the time we got to them, they were not in good shape, so they were happy to see us. So when you're looking at cooperative targets, and even this is the Lions Base Search and Rescue guys. We always used to play hide and seek with them, and when you look at the trees along that ridge on the left, they don't look that much different than the guy standing there actually waving. Now, when we were higher looking down, we could not see them. And when they took out a helicopter tarp, a bright red tarp, everybody in the 3 aircraft that were orbiting around there they are. There they are. And even when we came down to take a picture of them with the contrast to the sky, still difficult to see, especially when we're moving along at 90 knots. So it's really important that you have to stand out in clothing. One of the great things that we've seen just recently, for $7, if you buy for your survival pack a thermal blanket, but make sure you get the ones that have the orange, bright orange color on them, because that really stands out, and we would be able to see you miles away from that. And rather than standing there in a camo waving your arms, very, very difficult to see. So yeah, these are the kind of ones that we'd like to see in the snow, needing beer. Everything else is okay. So don't forget to download your app free for BC AdventureSmart. That's kind of all I had to talk about tonight, and I hope everybody learned something.
Thank you very much, Fred. There are questions. Are you able to stick around for a little bit for questions?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Marvelous. So let's start off. Mike, this is a question for me, so I get to ask the question, so why not start with mine? That signal mirror, what was the size of the signal mirror that made that big flash?
That was about 4 inches by 4 inches. We give them away. I wish I should have given one to Sandra, and we could add a couple of them for giveaways. Yeah, that wasn't a very big one. That's just the standard size that we have, that we actually give away when we have our ground, like when we have air shows. We will come out and put on just the same as GSAR does. We go out and do information booths, and yeah, we give those away.
So you talked a lot about downed planes and missing aircraft, but then at the end we were also talking about hikers and bikers. So how do you get involved? How does PEP Air end up getting involved in searches that probably didn't start as you, because they came into the RCMP as like a lost hiker who had their family dial 911?
Yeah, that's a great question. Normally, if we've had an experience, once a year we try to talk to the local ground search and rescue, municipal search and rescue teams, and ask them if they want to get an aerial view of their search area. And we take them up and show them their area, because it is a whole new perspective. And then they can also see what we're capable of doing. So we do have quite a few of them in the province that when they do have a missing mushroom picker, or they will call us, and we are pretty good at it. But if it's in deep forest and stuff, we can't really see through the canopy, but we're trying to change that through thermal imaging, trying to raise the bar on our capabilities. But normally it's usually EMBC when you call the EMBC to get the ground search and rescue team to mobilize, they have to think about, do we need PEP Air support? If it's a boat on a lake, man, we are so efficient on finding missing boats on lakes. But it doesn't get, it isn't an automatic thing. It has to be requested, which is a little bit unfortunate because there's been times when it's gone 2 days before they decided that maybe we should have been in, which might be a little bit too late sometimes. Normally, if you think that there's going to be a requirement for air support, we are very, very inexpensive. A lot of them like to use a helicopter or have access to helicopters, and that's great, but that's, you know, over $2,200 an hour starting, and we are around $2,200 an hour, or $220 an hour on average, or $300 an hour. A lot less expensive and no less effective, other than the fact that if you do mitigate the location and you need to get somebody in there, our fixed wing aircraft we could get it in there, but we won't get it out. So that's where the helicopter actually shines. So we like to say, keep the helicopter on the ground until we mitigate the location, and then you activate it. But it isn't a common standard operating procedure. It has to be requested.
Now, you've been a pilot for many years, but then at some point in time, you switched from being a pilot to actually being a SAR pilot. Is there additional training that you had to go through in order to actually become a part of PEP Air? Do you have to go, is there some kind of regular training that you take in order to
Absolutely.
keep your stuff going? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have 3 phases to that, where are you qualified, certified, and then there's recurrencies. So when I knew a couple of the pilots at the time, and I wasn't fully active flying, I was doing a lot of stuff with ground search and rescue and scuba dive. I was part of the dive team of some search and rescue up in Vernon, and that was many, many years ago, and I had my pilot's license. And a couple friends here on the Lower Mainland, when we moved here, asked if I would be interested in that, and I said, not really as a pilot, but I would be a navigator. So for about 2 years prior to becoming a pilot, I was a navigator, and then we started to realize that we really needed more pilots. So I had to go through the pilot program, which basically there's a ground school for that we go through. And once you've been a navigator for a while, that kind of removes a lot of the training that would be required because you've got the navigation point down. Then it's just up. There's about 7 crucial flights that you have to do under supervision to be able to show the skill level. And then once that's done, then you become certified, and then you have to maintain that currency of at least 7 search flights a year. But when you start, you don't do night flights, you don't do mountain or valley runs. It's all out on the plane until you get more experience and get more time in, and then you start getting the more complex calls over time. So that's basically how we do it. Same with the navigators and the spotters. The spotters are more cyclic than the pilots and the navigators, because once you get to that level, you're committed. It becomes part of your blood, I think.
So help me out. You've got those 3 types. You've got the pilot, the navigator, and the spotter. Give me a little bit more detail about what do they each do.
So the spotters would be in the back, and they're the most important people on the aircraft because they're the ones that are doing the work. They got the hardest job on board, looking on the left and the right windows, and we're training them to be used on the military aircraft. So they have to learn what it looks like for a distance. Say we're going to do a 3 nautical mile at 1,000 feet. They got to know what 1,000 feet looks like and what 3 nautical miles would be, and the scan procedure. The scanning procedure, there's a book written on it, and they have to train for that. It's a perishable skill. And the scanning of the eyes, moving left to right, if you're on the port side or the left side, you go to the 3 mile out and work your way in, but your eye has to stop on each of the on each of your scan in. You don't slide scan, you stop and look, stop and look, stop and look. And if you're on the right side or the starboard side, that's same thing, inboard to outboard up to the 3 miles. And then you do a shoulder check after about 3. So you really want to cover that area, and it's tiring. We only go about 15-20 minutes, and then we have to take about a 5-minute break, and then we go on. The navigator is yeah, it's a big deal, and that's why we get a little concerned sometimes when people jump into helicopters thinking they're going to go out and search. We never cover that area as being searched because it is a discipline. It is a detailed discipline capability. So, and it takes training, and it takes and it takes a while to stay current at it. There's recurrency training for that as well. So navigators are the guys that make sure that we're doing high coverage. The probability of detection is based solely on the of coverage, of the capability of the coverage area. Because if the target you're looking for is undetectable, meaning under snow or just underground or in the bottom of a lake, that is the probability of detection is pretty much zero. But if we can cover the areas as best we can with the eyes, and we're starting to integrate cameras now as well, to try and up the ante on that, but we still say three-dimensional lookers is still the most effective. We've proven that even to this day, using the new technologies that we're getting through drones and even the photo analysis and stuff that they're all doing, the visual spotter still has the highest rate of detection. And that's pretty cool. So the navigators will make sure that that coverage is being done properly. And then we also document what hasn't been covered, so we can go back and look at it and pick it up at a later time. And the pilot just does as he's told. He's just the driver, and make sure that his skill level has to be reasonably high, because you don't want to be doing tight turns and high-speed turns. Your spotters have to be comfortable, and coordinated turns is a skill for the pilot that has to be kept up so that they're not going to get sick on you. So you want to keep it, all the flying has to be as smooth as possible. So it's really quite a team that you have up there doing the searches. It's not just jumping in a plane and going. Look, there's some serious training going into it, and recurrency training to maintain that level of competency.
So for those spotters, do you end up having to, like, is there a standard speed that you go no matter what? Like, it doesn't matter how much level you're going at this speed, so the spotters can do what they need to do? Or does it depend on the terrain and how much they're going to have to look at?
Yeah, well, that's great. That's a great question. The terrain definitely dictates exactly how this is going to be done at what speeds. We do close contouring and stuff like that. So if we're doing a turn into a mountain range or a peak or something, the guy on the right's not seeing anything, so he might as well take a rest. But normally they will scan over the left spotter and look over. But it's based on the altitude. We can go slower. We usually run between 80 and 90 knots, which is comfortable at 1,000 to 1,500 feet. The cormorant can get down to 80 knots, but they have an awful lot of downwash, so they have to stay at around 1,000 feet as well. The buff is a little faster, but they got bubble windows, and you get tons of people looking out, and people do get sick in that thing. So it's perishable skills that have to be maintained. Yeah.
I'm fascinated. I could keep asking questions, because some of these questions were brought in by folks like Michelle and Sandra, but some of these questions have been from me, because I'm just fascinated by the whole thing. Maybe we'll get you back in our next summer series and have you for another round, because I'm quite enjoying this. But at this point in time, I'm going to pass things back to Sandra, because A, we've got that giveaway that I've been hinting at, and B, we also have to officially thank you. And I'm not good enough to officially thank you. It has to be Sandra, because she's the executive director. You don't want to be thanked by just the search and rescue guy from Coquitlam, right? You want to be thanked by an executive director. So let's go into that. Sandra, let's give those thanks coming.
Thank you, Scott. And Fred, that was awesome. This is a field outside of my realm. I know what you do. I know who you are. I understand the gist of it, but tonight was really engaging for me. It was really helpful. A lot of synergies, a lot of reminders, but I'm assuming it was some pretty new information for the participants tonight. We had a good crowd that joined us, and we had a few people from all over, and it's great to see that interest, because you had so much information to share. So Fred, thank you for your expertise. I agree with Scott. I would welcome you back in a second, and maybe I'll come out to Pitt Meadows. I was right beside you this afternoon, and join you in the hangar maybe for the next one.
Sure. Yep.
Awesome. Well, you and I speak in many acronyms. Scott speaks in many acronyms in our world, in search and rescue, and this is where my question is going to go. So everyone who's listening tonight and joined us, this is how you're going to win your prize tonight. One lucky winner will win an awesome pack stack. It kind of organizes your backpack in all of these great compartments. It's from Hillsound. Scott put the link in the chat feature, question feature, and you can see what it's all about. So get your fingers ready. And the first person to tell me what this acronym means in full, 100% correct, wins that Hillsack. And then you just have to, Hillsound, and then you just have to email us and go from there, but we'll give you those instructions. So here's the question. What does ELT stand for? I usually try to pick up something that our guests say early on in the presentations, but Fred did reference this a few times, and I'm familiar with the term. I'm sure Scott is, and hopefully you've learned it tonight.
And so is Oren, who answered right away. Thank you very much, Oren. I will give it to you despite the fact there's a small spelling error, but it does, you have it pronounced properly, which is good enough for me. So Oren, I've got your email address, and if you can also email us at info@bcadventuresmart.com, but I'll also make sure to pass on your email address that you subscribe to for this, and we're going to get that to you. We're not going to get an emergency locator transmitter to you, but we are going to get a Pack Stack Pro, from Hillsound to you.
Absolutely. Congratulations. Thanks for being quick on the draw there. And thanks again, Fred. And our winner to the lucky prize tonight can be in touch with Scott there or myself. And the easiest way to reach us here at BC Adventure Smart is at info@adventuresmartbc.ca. We have more summer series events coming up. The next one in the queue is with Mountain Equipment Company, MEC, as we know them. That will be pretty fun. It's all about packing for an overnight hiking adventure. That should be pretty cool. We have Coquitlam Search and Rescue coming. It won't be Scott. It will be one of his fellow SAR volunteers. It will be Wendy Harder. She's been with the group for almost 20 years. She's coming up in August, and stay tuned for others too. We've got some great giveaways on our social coming up as well. So lots going on. And again, Fred, keep in touch. We will welcome you back anytime. That was a great time to have you. And if anyone has questions, feel free to email us at that email, DM us on any of our socials. Have a great summer. Hopefully it kicks in and stays nice and sunny for us. We like it. And we'll see you again soon. Good night, everyone. Thanks.
Good night.
Good night, folks. Take care.